Price is the most important thing in a short-term rental. People reduce price too soon. And this is largely driven by our fear of being empty. If we tank the price, last minute, we're all kind of losing.
Is setting a base price for your vacation rental a mistake? What are the common revenue management errors hosts are making? And what can the short-term rental industry learn from airlines when it comes to setting ideal rates? Neal from Quibble is the special guest on today's House Planet podcast. He'll be answering all these questions and outlining how his platform is changing the face of revenue management in the STR sector. Neal, thank you so much for joining us on the House Planet podcast. When it comes to using a dynamic pricing tool, why is setting a base price a waste of time?
So when hosts or managers invest in dynamic pricing software, they're normally hoping that the software will tell them what the price should be. And instead, they're spending a lot of time creating and managing base prices, because what the model is going to do is then take that base price and use it as the foundation and just apply multipliers up and down to your base price. So in that regard, it's a waste of time, but also the model can't really find the optimal price for you. In regards, if you change the base price, the whole prices are going to shift up or down. So there's no optimal price point that it can find.
So how can you find that optimal price?
So I used to do pricing in the airlines. And in the airlines, we used a different type of pricing model, and it was called price optimization. And in that regard, there's no you don't give it a starting point. It's going to solve for what the price should be. So in that regard, what we're doing is saying, okay, this is what the market looks like. Here's all the data inputs. Try every price and then tell me which one's best. So in the event that you were to run an optimization model, there's no base price, because if, say, you give me a base price of 100, I'm going to try 100, but I'm also going to try 101, 102, 103. And then you just rely on the model to solve and say, hey, James, for next Saturday, the optimal price is 105.
And how do you do that with vacation rentals? How do you kind of test the different prices and then get that result of saying, look, this is the best one? How does that work in practice?
Okay, so you have to kind of zoom out and rethink the way that we're going to set the price. So basically what we're going to do first is try and predict, if you have a property, we're going to predict who your competitors are. That's the first thing we're going to do. And in pricing science, there's pretty good data that says consumers can only hold about 8 to 12 options in their head at one time. We're going to use 10 competitors that we think are your best competitors. And that's it. So in optimization modeling, the way we do it, there's not a lot of competitors. It's a very tight group that we've just searched for immediately. So then we're going to say, okay, what matters to the consumer that's about to choose this property? So you think about, their needs of bedroom count, bathroom count, location. You're going to say, okay, these are the properties that they might be looking at. And then when we start to optimize price, we start to think about, okay, what are the things in that listing that would choose someone, or cause someone to choose your property versus another one? And those turn out to be images, reviews, ratings, and other things. So all of those things play into the probability that you get booked. So what we're saying is, okay, if our property has the best pictures, has the best reviews, has the best ratings, we're going to have a really good chance if we show up on the screen in front of a consumer. But if not, or if we have really, really high quality competitors, it's going to adjust where our price needs to be. So we put all that data in, and for each of those things that we're calculating, there's a coefficient, or how much does it matter. Price is the most important thing in a short-term rental if someone's going to pick. That seems obvious, but it's the biggest impact. So we have to model for that and say, okay, all these things matter. And then as we start to evaluate each price point, we can determine the probability if you're going to get selected. And then we can run the model and it'll tell you what the price should be.
What is the difference between a dynamic pricing tool out there, maybe some of the industry leaders like Beyond, for example, and Quibble, what is the difference in the final price that gets spouted out as this is what it should be?
If you think about the underlying technology of what would happen if you put in a base price, and then what you're going to see the outcome of is they're trying to determine how much to change your base price. They're going to put a multiplying value on that, and they use different metrics to do that. And that's going to happen on every day. And they're going to say, okay, on these days, we should take your base price and move it up however much percent. So in that regard, it's pretty dependent on the base price that you're going to set. You know, your final price has a really high dependency on whatever base price you're setting. And what you're relying on Quibble to do for you, and the difference here and what we're doing is saying, okay, we just need your help determining, you know, the market and the competitors, and we're going to automatically try and determine them for you, make sure you're happy with who we're putting into the model. And then after that, we're going to determine the price. So it's kind of flipping the switch a bit and saying, okay, your role here as the property manager, host, or revenue manager is making sure that we got the right competitors in there. You know, we're understanding the market well, and then the price gets set. You're not managing a base price like you would be in other tools.
Okay, real talk now for all you hosts out there. You know that moment when your guest messages you again with, hey, what's the Wi-Fi code? Or you're staring at 5 different calendars, wondering if you've accidentally double booked the cottage. Yes, we've all been there. That's why here at Host Planet, we recommend Hostfully. It's basically your rental's control center. It handles bookings across all the big platforms, syncs your calendars to ensure there are no double bookings, automates guest messages, and even creates these really slick digital guidebooks that stop all the repeat questions. Honestly, it just makes your life easier and keeps your guests happier, helping you achieve those all-important 5-star reviews. And here is a little bonus. If you're a Host Planet listener, you can get $500 off onboarding for Hostfully's property management software and 30% off digital guidebooks for life. Just hit the link in the show notes and use the codes PLANET500 for the PMS and HostPlanetGB for the guidebooks. And if you'd like a proper walkthrough, there's also a link to book a demo with Frank Bosey from Hostfully. He will show you how it all works. Less stress, more bookings, sorted with Hostfully. What all the dynamic pricing platforms have in common is setting a minimum rate. Obviously, hosts say, look, this is the minimum that I'm prepared to take. Is there an argument to say that you shouldn't set a minimum rate?
Yes. If you're straight wanting to maximize revenue, you don't constrain the model. But that's not okay. When you talk to a host or a property manager, they've got owners that might say, hey, I don't care if I'm unbooked. You know, don't take my price below this price point. And to them, that's the intrinsic value that they feel of the property, and they would rather not be booked. There's also an argument here of reputation of the property, in the sense of if you have an extremely high-end property and the model says I've got zero demand, I've got to take the price really far down here, that might not be the best interest of the property long term, because the model is solving for the best revenue on that single day, not like trying to determine all future value. So there's constraints that pure revenue management, no constraints apply. In terms of managing host or owners' kind of expectations and limitations, then restrictions apply.
Yeah, I guess with that kind of model, if you charge anything just to get a booking, your occupancy level is going to be near to 100%. And there's revenue managers out there who say you should never be close to 100%. It means you're not charging enough. They'll say, you should be around 60%, maybe 70%. Where is the sweet spot, do you think, in terms of occupancy for vacation rentals?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the property. But when you're running an optimization model, like what we were talking about before, it's trying to find the point that's going to maximize your earnings, not your ADR or your occupancy. So on every single day, there is a maximum point. And what we're trying to do behind the scenes is say, okay, what's the total amount of people that are going to book on this day? So we use historical demand kind of like the airlines do. And we say, okay, we think there's 12 people that are going to book. Well, we only have 10 properties, right? So we're thinking, oh, there's no need to discount the price. Now, over time, that those other properties start to get booked. And we might say, okay, we missed a few and the price continues to adjust. But when you're, creating a revenue management strategy, it should be a RevPAR strategy, not like a true revenue management answer to the question is, I don't care what my occupancy is. I don't care what my ADR is. All I care about is the final revenue. And that's what your model should be doing.
There will be hosts and property managers out there who say, my property is totally unique. I can't compare it to anybody else because it's just not similar. And it's in an area where we're the only ones for 50 square miles or something like that. And your model, as you were explaining at the start, you're picking comparable properties to compare things to. What do you say to those hosts and property managers who say, my rentals are too unique?
They might be right. I mean, there's a chance that there are no, like, if someone is shopping and they're only considering that property, then it's pretty hard to say, okay, the consumer is only making one choice. And it's basically assuming somewhat of a monopolistic scenario where that's all that's going to happen. And it's pretty hard. So, in that regard, you might say, I know what the price should be and I don't want it to be dynamic. And if that's the case, you can lock it in. They may be right. Generally speaking, most properties, when people are shopping, they're looking at other options. But in those really unique cases, dynamic pricing is very hard.
So just run through us then, what are the most important data points to analyze when setting rates for a property?
All right, so there I put them in two buckets. One is the things you can't change. You can't really change the location. You can't easily add bedrooms or, other things. And those are kind of the things that we're using when we're trying to pick your competitors, because the person that needs a property needs either a 4-bedroom in that location, right? So we're using a lot of that data for competitor selection. The other data that goes into price optimization is the things that do change or you can change. So we're talking about ratings, reviews, images, amenities. All of those things play into the probability that you're going to get booked. As I said before, price, when it correlates to choice, if someone's going to pick your property, has the biggest impact. But the other things like images have a huge impact if someone is going to pick. And what we've done to try and solve for that is we've run your images through an AI model that tries to determine how much does a human like this image. We do the same thing for your competitors. Same with the reviews. You might have amazing reviews, and that's awesome. It's going to help you get booked. If your competitors have bad reviews, that helps us keep your price higher. But if they also have amazing reviews, it causes us to be more competitive. So all of those attributes go into the model. It's automated. You don't have to do anything. We pull that data in, and it helps to optimize. There are things that we don't think matter very much. So, sometimes hosts spend a lot of time trying to come up with the right name for the property or the right description. When we did survey data, those things didn't correlate very high to if someone's going to pick your property or not. So we actually took them out of the model because when we ran it, it just didn't have much impact.
Interesting. Very interesting. It's one of the things we hear about quite a lot, isn't it? The titles and the listing descriptions. So just to explain to us then how Quibble's approach differs from other dynamic pricing tools that are out there.
So when we're, to continue on the quality type of the property, we're trying to determine when someone's looking at 10 properties or, you're going through that shopping experience, we're pulling that data, and each of those attributes that we described has an impact on if you get chosen or not. So imagine we pull all the data from your property. We have all your images, we have all your reviews, all your ratings, your amenities. Do you have a pool? Do you have a hot tub? Do you have a view, a mountain view, river view, all those things? And we can say, okay, we know kind of the quality of your property. Now, to set the price, we need to do the same thing for what else is on the screen at the time. So we're going to guess what those properties are going to be. And we do that looking at all your competitors. We do a big data collection poll and we say, okay, this is everything in the market. Who is the most likely to be compared or chosen instead of me. So that's all we care about. No one else is considered a competitor in that model. The only other data that goes into it is someone or another listing that we think may get chosen instead of you. Everything else is irrelevant. And then we say, okay, now we have an idea of the market, we have an idea of what it looks like on that day, and then probability comes into play. Probability-based modeling is really hard to do. It's what we used to do in the airlines, but we're going to try now give you a market share probability. So in the model, if you look at any of the days, you can say, okay, on this day, it says I have a 20% probability of getting booked. What that describes to the manager is if you're on the screen with these properties based on everything we know about your listing and everything we know about your competitors, that's a chance you get selected. Now, as you were describing before, well, do I want to increase my chance? Like, should I drop my price? Like I could take that 20% chance of getting booked, increase it to 90%, right? Yes, you could do that. If you want to drop your price to $5 a night, we could do that, right? Or you could say, oh, I have a minimum price and I'm never going to go below that. Okay, that's the price we're going to set, and your probability may drop to 5% or 1%. So what we're relying on the model to do for us is pick the one that maximizes our expected earnings.
Is this true set and forget in terms of pricing?
All right. I would say right now, where we're at in pricing science, and I can talk about what we do, it's probably 85 to 90% of the pricing choice can be handled by the model. I'd say there's still room 10 to 15% for us, the human or the analyst or the revenue manager, to evaluate what the model's doing and try to say, oh, I think I know a little bit more here, or maybe the model's missing a little bit of information here, and it might be helpful if I make some adjustments, or I can see some macro trends from whatever's going on with tariffs or anything that people are worried about. That's not programmed into the model. So you got these external layers. It's like, hey, you're not going to be able to see this, so let's try and get in front of it. So there's still room here for the human, but if you're a super busy property manager and you say, okay, I'm not going to spend 10 or 15% trying to figure out what those are, you're still going to do better. You're going to make more money because you're going to be priced really well.
And interestingly, what you're saying there is that there isn't a element of the pricing that takes into account Donald Trump. Not yet.
Right. Not yet. Not yet. That's a more expensive model. We're going to have to work on
it. Let's kind of talk a few pricing and revenue management tactics now. How far in advance should hosts be adjusting their rates, and how frequently should they be tweaking them? Let's imagine that they have static rates, or they don't use dynamic pricing, or even if they do use dynamic pricing, how often should they be looking at stuff?
All right. So it depends a bit on the size of the property. So if it's really big, imagine a 5 or 6 bedroom, the family that might book that or the group is going to book that further in advance, right? Because they got to schedule all those people and get that done. So those bigger properties will book out further, smaller properties closer in. So you kind of understand the booking curve, right? And when revenue managers say booking curve, they're kind of watching the occupancy of that property fill up. And normally there's a point in that curve where you see the acceleration or it start to pick up, which means that's when most people are interested in booking that 1 bedroom in that city, right? So as a revenue manager, generally, you want to be right before that period checking the price, because you want to go into the peak of that curve or the steep part of that curve, making sure your prices are ready. And that can change depending on the type of property. And if you have a lot of listings or a lot of different markets, you'll have a lot of different time periods that occurs.
When it comes to revenue management and pricing rentals, what are the most common mistakes that you see hosts and property managers making?
Okay. In the airlines, there's research that gets done. I know more about airlines because I spent a lot of time there, that tries to look back at the decisions that got made. And most of the time, what we see is the errors happen that people reduce price too soon. And this is largely driven by our fear of being empty. And I guess if you think about the layers, sometimes it's the host of this is your property, or sometimes you have the property manager and they have to go to their owners and say, hey, the price or the calendar was empty. And that's a hard conversation. And I think it drives a lot of fear and drives a lot of last minute discounting. So the biggest mistake I think in all revenue management is aggressive discounting. And I think in our industry in particular, we have a lot of last minute discounting. And that is really pervasive where it's just like, okay, I got to tank the rate here. And I think as an industry, it could be corrected, but we kind of have to come together as like, hey, if we tank the price last minute, we're all kind of losing.
Yeah, and I guess that will feed into guest behaviour as well. If they're just going to think, well, I'm going to book last minute because I know I'm going to get 20% off the price. In terms of the airlines, I'm quite interested. Do airlines have minimum rates? Because sometimes you get on a plane and there's a few empty seats, and you think, well, maybe they could have sold them if they'd have discounted them heavily.
Yeah. So I was in the airlines during the transition to like low cost carriers or ultra low cost carriers. So I guess you'd be more familiar with Ryanair. I used to work at an airline called Frontier, and these type of airlines basically got rid of a lot of restrictions. But what you generally see in the airlines are advanced purchase rules. And those, if you ever are shopping and you get within a certain period of time, what they will do is close out all the discount rates or the discount price points and say, hey, at this point in time, if I'm 7 days in, meaning there's only 7 days left to book, the major carriers are expecting that traffic is largely business traffic. There might be, imagine 5 business people and 2 leisure travelers. They're going to allow the leisure travelers to stay home, and they're going to try and capture the 5 business passengers because to them, that's worth a lot more. So the trend in the airlines is 180 degrees opposite, where as you get closer, generally those price points start to close and they say, hey, if you need to go to New York right now and it's tomorrow or whatever, they're like, you have this really inelastic demand. So it's actually a lot the opposite in the airlines.
I wonder if there are property managers out there who put the price up if it's a short booking window to the guests arriving. And just following on from that, I mean, this might be one of the key lessons, but what are the key things that vacation rental managers could learn from the airline industry when it comes to pricing?
That is it. I mean, pricing discipline in terms of creating a strategy and sticking to it in the sense of this is going to sound counterintuitive, but dynamic pricing is generally an admission that we can't get the price right the first time. Like we can't perfectly predict the market. So when I was in the airlines, we were trying to change the price as few times as possible. That sounds weird, right? But if say we do it really early and we get the price set correctly 100 days out or 90 days out, the price would be less dynamic because we've actually solved the correct price early in that window. And that's the advantage of trying to use optimization or forecast-based modeling where it's, okay, we're going to try and get to the right price as soon as we can. And if we get it right, we're not actually going to change it because it's the correct price. So it's actually counterintuitive. And the better we get at forecasting, the better we can get at, not having to dynamically adjust the rate as much. And it sounds counterintuitive, but as our goal as a revenue manager is to set the right price, and then we got it.
We've all heard of hosts and property managers out there who maybe they've got a few rentals and they've heard about dynamic pricing and they want to give it a try, and then they log in and maybe just find it too complicated. And there are other people out there who say, yes, you can use one of these brilliant dynamic pricing tools, but you need somebody to manage it, to drive it for you, because it is difficult. Is it possible to manage a dynamic pricing tool effectively if you're a pretty non-techie host?
I'd say yes. It's kind of back to the 10% thing where it's like, okay, 90% of the work is in setting it up and from our perspective. if we get it set up properly, which takes time to put the data in, evaluate it, make sure that everyone's on board with the price, the minimum stay strategies, all that. Most of the work should be done up front. And you can either use a consultant. We provide some consultancy if you want help setting up. And then it should be well managed. Now, the 10 or 15% can come in events that the model doesn't know when certain events are going to be launched, or holidays might be managed better by using some controls. So inside the application, we have controls for holidays, controls for events that you can create and manage. So I think, yes, you can set it up and it will work very effectively for you. If you manage it and you want to put in the effort to try and capture that 10 to 15%, then it'll work better.
Stands to reason. Tell us about Quibble then a little bit, and tell us about any success stories of people who've maybe moved over from a different software and they've joined Quibble. What has the uplift been maybe after a year or so?
Yeah, so most of our clients, as you imagine, have come over from using a competitive tool. We're just doing for our website some customer stories. And we were reviewing some data for a client of ours in New Orleans. It's Book NOLA. They have a really nice portfolio of properties and managed by a guy named Mike Springer. And they had seen over probably 9 months consistent unit revenue or RevPAR growth about 15 to 20%. So just by getting a better understanding and using this type of modeling, he saw really good results. Most of our clients see something like that, where they'll come over and, by adding in these quality-based metrics and making decisions, more at the nightly level, you'll see a pretty good improvement.
And tell us, what's the cost of using Quibble and where should people go to find out more?
We charge by listing, so it's $10 per property per month, and they can sign up at quibblerm.com.
All right, check it out. We'll put that link in the show notes as well. Just before we get to our questions to finish then, Neal, what trends are you seeing in the STR space in 2025 that hosts and property managers should know about?
All right, it's a trend that started probably before 2025, but there's a lot of conversation right now about AI. And I think there is confusion about what that means. And I think what we see really is 90% marketing, 10% product when it comes to AI and what's available. And hosts or managers probably have a feeling that they might be, missing the train on AI. I'm not saying they shouldn't invest or they shouldn't try and uncover great opportunities. But when people say everything is AI, then nothing is AI. And for us, we see two really good use cases for true artificial intelligence to help you price. It's in the images that we were talking about before with computer vision, and then understanding language. So we also extract text from reviews and try and help understand how that might impact the next booking or not. So I think the trend in AI is really important. But it's also a lot of marketing. So pulling that apart, I think, is really critical for management companies.
Great advice, I think. All right then, Neal, a few questions to finish. What's your favorite brand in the STR space, apart from Quibble, of course?
Apart from Quibble, I think it's really interesting what Casago is doing with Vacasa. I think it tells an interesting story about where property managers, are going to be focused and kind of what the next couple of years of the industry might look like in terms of the importance of the local connection to the market, I think is really interesting. All
right. Two great brands there, and merged, haven't they? Now it's all sorted. It's all done now. So we'll I'm sure we'll find out more about that in the near future. An individual in the STR space that you'd like to give a shout out to, and why?
So we have an advisor to our company. He's in the travel tech space, and he works at really high level in price and price optimization, and guided us a lot through understanding how consumers make choices, and then understanding how to build a model that that will optimize for that. Is Jim Barlow. He's high-level revenue management operator, worked at Sabre, currently at Amadeus, a big travel tech company. He's been really critical in forming price modeling for us.
Excellent. Nice shout out there for Jim. Finally, then, your number one lesson learned since founding Quibble.
I think there's a really interesting opportunity for us in this space for pricing. I think, as you see, there's a lot of new consultants coming up that'll do price revenue management for you. And I think we have a really good opportunity to, drive pricing science and the underlying technology that makes better pricing. Because what we have that's different than the airlines, that's different than the hotels, is extremely unique products. And we should be able to price accordingly. Airlines are pricing seats on a 180, seat plane. Some hotels have, 100, 300 rooms, and they're similar. We have really interesting opportunity to pull out the uniqueness of all these listings and incorporate it into our pricing.
The future is pricing. We'll wait to see what comes out. But the science behind it is certainly fascinating. Neal, thank you so much. I feel like I've learned a lot about pricing and revenue management today. Thanks for joining us on the Host Planet podcast.
Thank you, James.
Fascinating to chat to Neal Sear there from Quibble about all aspects of revenue management. If you're looking for more free education, head to hostplanet.club, the fastest growing multimedia platform in the short-term rentals industry. We're proud to help hosts and property managers supercharge their businesses by sharing a wealth of free content. Head online to sign up for our newsletter, download our suite of ebooks, and listen to our podcast series. Until next time, happy hosting.